Welcome back to it, your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso, right here on SABC3. Hope you're getting that feel-good in on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Thanks so much for choosing to wake up with us this morning. Now, it's time to step into the world of law with Eitan Stern, right,
exactly.
on a Wednesday.
And if you are renting a property and you perhaps have a landlord that you are just not getting along with, well, then you might want to pay attention because this one is for you.
So it's time for another edition of our Wednesday feature where we focus on the unconventional side of the law, and we love it. We're calling it So Now What? And we're joined once again by our expert lawyer and director at Legalise.co.za, Eitan Stern. Now, one of the Expresso team members recently had a run-in with their landlord over a leaking pipe. Now, the landlord has promised to fix it for months with no success, and now the walls are being damaged and there's consistently a puddle of water forming in the passage. The question is, so now what, Eitan? How are you doing, brother?
I'm good. So now what?
So now what? I think it's a tough one. I think, many people have gone through the motions of renting a place and dealing with landlords and agencies and just having a hairy situation in times. So now what? That's the big question. But the line between my responsibility and the landlord's responsibility, some people get that blurred. And that's what we want to find out exactly. So what is it? What's my responsibility? What's the landlord's responsibility in a situation maybe like this?
Okay, so with renting, it's always going to be a balance between these two things. You've got the tenant's right to be able to rent a property and live there and enjoy their home, and you've got a landlord's right to basically take care of this expensive asset that they've bought. So, everything when it comes to renting is going to fall as a balance between these two things. So a landlord is going to be responsible for making sure that the property is livable. So you can't, for example, rent out a house which doesn't have a bathroom because that's not a livable property. They have to make sure that the property is upkept. So if a pipe breaks or the elevator breaks or something major happens, then it is the landlord's responsibility. And of course, the landlord has to ensure that the tenant has privacy in their property. The tenant, on the other hand, has to play their side of the bargain. They have to pay their rent on time. They have to make sure that the place is upkept as best as possible as well. So that's going to be the smaller stuff. The door handle breaking, the light bulbs that need changing, the stuff that really is wear and tear of living in the property. And they have to make sure that they abide by the rules within the lease.
Okay, and obviously look after like you said,
look after the property.
How important is a written lease when you go into that agreement? I mean, would you say that has to be firmly in place?
Okay, so it's really crucial. So pretty much, one of the main bits of advice that we give as lawyers is make sure it's in writing. So any scenario that you're in, make sure it's in writing. And why? Because writing gives certainty. It's much better than a verbal agreement because we have something to reflect back on. So it is really crucial, in my opinion, to make sure a lease is in writing because it's going to cover all the rules by which you're allowed to lease this place. Are you allowed to Airbnb it? What's the termination period that you have to give if you want to leave? How much rent is being paid? If it's not in writing, it's really a guess. And a lease doesn't have to be this long, complicated document. They're relatively simple. You can get one offline. You can buy one. I think at CNA they sell them, and it just has to cover the rules by which you rent the place. Now, us as lawyers, we get a pretty bad name. We get called sharks. But landlords are like killer whales. If if you really don't want to land up in a bad situation with your landlord. So it's just best to get everything in writing. It's only going to make the whole situation smooth.
Sure, lots to consider, Eitan. We're going to be chatting more about this in just a minute. Don't go anywhere because we also want to talk about how do you protect yourself if you are going to be entering into one of those rental agreements. We want to make sure that you are sorted. We'll be back with So Now What in just a bit.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your feel-good breakfast show. Happy Wednesday, and thanks for tuning in and starting the fresh day with us. It's time that we continue now with our brand new legal segment, if you haven't heard about it yet. It's called So Now What, where we discuss all kind of bizarre concepts of the law. And today we're talking about bad landlords. Let's hear what Eitan has to say.
So we are back with our expert lawyer, Eitan Stern, this morning from Legalise.co.za, and it's time for So Now What? What do you do if you are renting and you have some issues? We're answering all of those questions. Eitan, thank you once again for joining us this morning. Lovely to have you. Something I didn't touch on in the previous segment this morning with regards to renting. Is it legal for your landlord to ask for 3 months bank statements? Can he do that?
Okay, he or she could do that, essentially. It's like, a landlord's job is to make sure that whoever they're renting the property to is going to look after their property. And so you really want to have someone that you've vetted. So just like you're allowed to meet the person and see whether they are the type of person that you want in your property, the reason they check bank statements is to make sure that you earn enough in order to pay the rent.
Yeah.
So they are allowed to ask for it. You, of course, as the tenant, are allowed to refuse. You're allowed to say, look, I don't want to give you the bank statements, but then you're probably not going to get the flat.
Yeah.
So there are some situations in which credit providers are not allowed to ask for to see your pay slips or what you earn. But lease agreements are specifically, or lease agreements for property are specifically excluded from the National Credit Act. So there really isn't a problem with a landlord asking to see your bank statements.
Okay, but I mean, once again, it's important to note that you don't have to give it unless, but like you said, you might miss out.
You might miss out.
Yeah.
It's a choice.
So what are some of the things that you can put in place to really protect yourself before entering into a rental agreement?
Okay, cool. So, yeah, as I said earlier, the pre-inspection is crucial. Understanding the deposit, deposit that you're paying is crucial. The lease agreement is crucial. And of course, a very crucial thing is to get educated about it, to understand what your rights are. There's the Rental Housing Act, which is a really good resource where you can understand what your obligations are. And there's also about knowing about the rental tribunal. If something goes wrong in a lease agreement and you want to, you're in a situation where you're really struggling, you know, there is the rental tribunal that you can go to, which can help to. It's like a court which only deals with rental issues, and you can always approach them.
I want to quickly touch on, I think something that a lot of people might, find a little bit like intense. I think that is when they decide to leave the flat one day. What's your responsibility when you leave the place? I mean, in terms of how you leave it, the things that you need to look after, because a lot of times you can leave and then the landlord becomes like, yeah, but this, yeah, but that, you didn't take this, you didn't do that. What is your responsibility?
Okay, so this is really where most of the issues around leaseors and leasees come up, is when it's about when they leave. So when you leave, the general rule is what you're supposed to do is return the property to the state in which you found it, which is why the pre-inspection check is so crucial. If there's a big hole in the roof, when you're leaving the property, you want to be able to say that hole was there when you moved in. So it is your responsibility to return the place to as it was, fix up the walls, paint the place if need be, and get it back to exactly as it was with the pre-inspection. Now, where it wasn't returned to the place as you found it, that is where the deposit is used. Now, you can charge, landlords will charge a deposit of generally between 1 to 2 months worth of rent. If it's more than 2 months, you really should be a little circumspect of that. And the landlords can then use that deposit to fix whatever went wrong. But that's where it's crucial now to make sure that the landlords are giving you receipts for what they've fixed, and that they're only fixing what was really your wear and tear, which broke it.
Yeah, and you also must keep that line of communication open so that they don't, because you get landlords sometimes that would get the highest guy come and do it, or highest price guy.
Communication really is everything with these things. If you're the sort of tenant that have spray painted the walls and throwing house parties every night, you really should expect to have a bad relationship with your landlord. But if you're taking care of the property, you're communicating, then the law will be on your side, and you should be able to get back what's yours.
Keep it clean.
Keep it clean. Keep it in writing.
Just like that. Keep it clean. I like that. Eitan, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So there we have it. That's your audition for So What Now? That's the big question that we answered, hopefully for you this morning. But I think first and foremost, make sure that your documentation is in order and that there's a paper trail. Very, very important.